Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about player engagement.
Yes. We're trying to figure out what
That was a long
good
pause.
title.
Sorry about that.
But anyway, that's what we're going with. Player engagement. What does that mean?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I think this means is making sure that the players are actively paying attention to your game as a GM, right?
Not only your game. Well, at the
game table.
At the game.
So as a GM, I think the very first off is as a GM, you should run a good game, right? It should be interesting. It should be non-cliched. You know, the old cliches are kind of tired by now. Unless, of course, you have brand new players that never played D&D before.
Or it's a one-shot where Mike likes to say, if the hook is out there on a one-shot,
yes,
you should definitely take it. Otherwise,
right.
What are you going to do?
I did mention that. You're right. When it's a one-shot, you really have to, as a player, just latch on to whatever the GM is throwing out there because you're only playing once and you're usually playing for a very limited time. Well, for me, a very limited time is like 3 to 4 hours. I used to run really long games, but 4 to 5 hours seems to be a pretty good number of hours to run. But for a one-shot, it could be really short. It could be as short as 2 hours, though. That's pushing the limits for me.
2 hours is kind of, yeah.
So, number one, for a GM to keep the players engaged is the character's backstory. And sometimes players don't want a backstory. They're just like, oh, I'm an orphan, blah, 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 whatever. But if you actively ask them to make a backstory, say, I need a backstory just so I know where you're coming from, so I know where to put you in the world if you don't know the world very well. Like currently we're playing in Forgotten Realms. I don't think I asked for a backstory from any of you guys, because we were just going to play the Lost Mines of Phandelver. And I think the ultimate consensus is that we're going to continue to play D&D 5th edition and make it into a campaign. I think that's what the consensus was. You're looking at me like you don't know.
I must have fallen asleep or dropped off the call for that one. But
So that's the ultimate decision we made, because Mike wants to have a long-term campaign. And instead of learning a whole new system that people are not familiar with, whether it's whatever game that is, D&D is something that we've all been playing for an extended period of time.
I think that on the backstories sometimes are hard for players to come up with for their characters, especially if it's a one shot or you're not sure what's going on. But I think part of the idea of backstory in some games, they say, tell me how your character is related, like Tales from the Loop. You have to have a reason for being with these other kids, right?
Right.
So I think that can be, if the players don't make a very big backstory, at least you can connect them.
Right, exactly.
And I think backstories are important. Well, not necessarily. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But my story for a good backstory and how it can keep the players engaged in the game is, we were playing, I don't know what game it was, but Bay made this character that was like a gecko, but some kind of we were playing animals.
Oh, okay, yes.
And his little lizard guy.
It was a salamander.
A salamander. His little salamander was obsessed with finding
ancient things.
Ancient monuments.
Yes.
Was the thing. And so that was a good backstory because it kept the players engaged in a way that may or may not have been part of the GM's idea of what was going on. But he was so obsessed with these that we saw a snake on this monument, and and the snake was going to eat him.
Right.
So Mike and I were playing with him. I don't remember if anybody else was playing, but I remember
there was another character, because I think there was 4 of you.
But I remember that
Sip
Mike and I had to come up with a plan. I don't know if Sip was at that particular on that particular adventure. But Mike and I came up with a plan. He cast fast on me or something like that. And so I ran. I was a hedgehog, so I ran fast and I picked up the salamander.
And you ran away.
Ran away. Before the snake could eat him.
Because he was actively the salamander. I forgot what the salamander's name was. Sorry, Bay. And he was talking to the snake.
Yes.
Because he thought the snake was like the guardian of this monument, when the snake was just hanging around this thing. And as the snake was trying to tell him to come closer so he can see the ruins on this ancient monument, he was going, oh, yeah, really? And so he started going forward. Of course, you guys already know, by that time had known that he was very obsessed with anything ancient.
Yes.
So I put out this obelisk out in the middle of nowhere, and he bit into that. And I thought, well, he wants to see old things. I'll give him an obelisk or something along those lines. And it was real funny because you guys were very like wary of the snake. He wasn't, because it was what do you call it?
He was enthralled by the
monument,
monument.
And didn't see the danger. And he was very upset when you picked him up and ran away. But
well, it kept all the players engaged. It was a backstory item, and it makes it interesting when certain players are obsessed with something, or they have a goal that maybe everybody knows about. So you have to kind of keep them on track. Like one time when you were playing I don't remember what you were playing, but you had this thing about plans.
I was playing a gnome.
And anytime anybody said there was a plan, we could make the whole plan up, and then you would totally do something totally different. So we made a consensus to not use the word plan. And he would always say, "Is this the plan?" And we go, "No, this is not a plan."
Well, because it's actually part of the D&D. What is it? The things you can put in your backstory. And it was like from the book. It says you do not like plans and you never follow them. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. And as a gnome they're curious, and can easily get distracted by something that's not according to the plan. And you guys were really into the players. Were really. I don't think, were you running the game? You had to be running the game.
I was running the game.
The players always make these elaborate plans and stuff like that. And I was just like, okay, sounds good. And then like when we went into whatever we were doing, I just, like you said, I would do something completely different. They're like, what are you doing? And I would just laugh and go, this is interesting. And it got to the point where they really hated me and didn't like my character going off book.
I don't think they hated you. I think they just realized that
annoyed
that they couldn't use the word plan.
Yeah.
Or you would do something totally
different. Because I would say, is this the plan? They're like, nope, this is not a plan. Well, it's funny is they thought it was the word plan that was the thing, and it had nothing to do with it. But anyway, you're right. And that all stems from the player background, right? And so what's important for a GM is that when a player puts a background for their character, they're actively telling whoever reads this piece of background what they're interested in. And if that is not a clue hammer for the GM, I don't know what would be, right? Because basically they're telling you what they find interesting, and if you put that in their game, their game, however you want to phrase it, they're gonna be interested in that, and it would be an interesting way for the players to get hooked on a plot or anything else that you put in front of them. So I think that's why it's important for players to make background stories. Not only that, as you may not even have a very clear idea of what your character is like. You know, I made a fighter who is doing this or that, and maybe that's it. But if you make a backstory, you write it down, you yourself will find out that what you want to see in the game.
Right.
So that was backgrounds. Also choices, right? As a GM, give your players choices, right? And don't make them arbitrary, because the arbitrary choices doesn't help. Like, which way do you want to go, left or right? What's the difference? One's left, one's right. No. And I think we were watching YouTube, and there was this guy called, I forget his name, but he had a Mystic Craft, what I believe is a YouTube channel, and he described it as a game. Make everything a game. Now, I've never looked at it that way, but it sounded interesting. But he's coming from the idea of video games. Maybe he was talking about Baldur's Gate, and then that you just kind of scroll around on the page. So Baldur's Gate 3, you scroll the mouse around, and anything of interest lights up.
The idea that what I got from his conversation was, it was amazing to me, the thought that a lot of people play online role-playing games or online video games. And the fact that you can scroll over something and see what it is, and then there's like a person to talk to, or if you're going into a room, there's things that you're going to engage with.
Right.
And so what he was saying was that the GM needs to take that into account, because if you just say you open the door and it's a library.
Right.
What do you do? The players are going to go, well, depending on the players.
Right.
The guys I play with would go right in to see what's going on.
Right.
But some players might be going, well, what can I do? Like
Is
they're
it-
thinking in their head, right? And they don't say anything.
Or they'll say, is there anything in the room? No, it's a library. It's full of books. They're going, okay, let's go. Where else can we go? Or,
And then the GM's going, well, I have all these things in the library that I
Right.
wanted you to look at, but if you're not gonna, you don't even want to go in the library.
right. There's something that has to entice the players, especially if they come from that kind of a background where they're playing video games, right?
Now, if you play with if you play with players that have been
Old.
playing since AD&D, they're gonna go, oh, it's a room. Let's check it. Let's see what's in there, and they're gonna check everything in the room,
Right.
which is very eye opening for me because I'm like, well, I'm a more mission oriented
Right.
kind of person.
What's
right?
in here that's gonna,
Is there anything that's going to help us on whatever the quest is that we're doing? Whereas, like, they want to check and see if there's treasure or if there's
valuable
a scroll
book.
that could help you.
Oh, yeah,
and all kinds of
yeah.
different things. And I was like, oh, okay. But I'm not a real dungeon person, right? So I didn't realize that was something that you could do. So that was interesting to me when he was talking about
right.
making sure that engages the player into playing the game with whatever's in that bookcase.
Right. And I looked at it the same way. I've never seen it or heard it described that way, but I can see how if you're coming, and even if you don't come from a video game, role-playing game background and you're starting to play D&D, that is enticing because some people are like, oh, they'll see a library and they think, oh, it's a library.
It has books.
It has books. Okay. Nothing my character is interested in is in there. But if you say, well, there's a table in there, there's maps, there's books open, and you see what looks to be a plain piece of like a notebook that's half written, right? So like they might, well, I'm gonna go see what was somebody writing the book for, and that then they're in the room, they're looking around, and there's more things to discover. And once they get inside the room, but if they never step inside the room, that's not going to happen.
Well, and as a player, you should choose when the GM says, "Oh, it's a library. What are you going to do?" You should choose to ask questions.
Right.
Does anything stand out when I look through the door? Is it lit? Is it dark? Is there anybody in there? Different kinds of things like
Right.
that. And then that'll give the GM a clue that yes, you're willing to go into the library and discover what's going on.
Exactly. And I think what happens is that he was talking kind of like a risk reward kind of thing. So there has to be, a reward for their actions, right? They got to figure something out. Whether I don't mean a monetary reward. They don't have to. Doesn't have to be a bag of gold underneath every piece of paper or something, or inside a book. But there's got to be something that they value when they do something. And I think that was a key part of what he was talking about, and how I naturally just presented the situations where if they do something, they are rewarded with either
Finding
something or finding information that will be useful for them.
Right.
So the third one is consequences for their actions or inaction as a player, right? When you're GMing. And for me, the classic is the village that has a goblin problem, right? There's a new band of goblins that come in and you have to go find a princess, right? And so this is just a village on the way. And this is kind of like a side quest that the GM throws in. Now, for the GM, it doesn't really matter. You can go out, clear the warren of the goblins that came in, or you can just ignore that and say, well, we're on a more important mission, right? And whatever. That's either one of those decisions is valid, but there has to be a consequence in the world when that happens, right? When you make that decision.
Well, I think that is true. But as a player, sometimes am I supposed to go and clear the goblins? Or is this just information that's not very useful?
Right.
But also as a player, you should go, well, the GM is taking time to tell you this. Someone in the town is telling you this. Maybe you should look into it, even if it is a side quest of what you're trying to do, right?
And even it's the dilemma that some people the heroes find themselves in, right? They are heroes in the game, especially in D&D, and in many games, the players are heroes. Usually, there's some games where they're just normal folk
or they're investigating something, though they're in some kind of a situation
You're
where
right.
they have to figure something out.
But I'm saying that the level of what the players are, right? They're like in D&D, they're basically heroes.
Right.
In Warhammer Fantasy, they're basically just run of the mill average characters that are trying to live in this terrible world. So there's that. But I think what is interesting is I think a lot of players feel that after a while, it doesn't really matter what they do. Things just go on being the same. And I think this kind of consequences and reactions of what happens is like, so let's say they do help the village, right? Let's clear out this warren. It's not going to take us that long. So they do that, and they come back, and then the villagers are grateful, right? They're like, yeah. They throw a feast in their honor, blah, blah. And then they go do their adventure, and then they happen to be coming back months later, or maybe even years. And all of a sudden they have the streets named after them, or a pub, or children named after them. And I think the village is prospering. It's bigger than it was when they first got there or when they first passed through. Or the opposite is true, right? If they don't help and they could continue and they just happen to be coming back, either they come to a less prosperous village with less people, or even a deserted village that has just disappeared because those goblins were then overtaken by orcs, and then this idea of easy pickings, and in those kind of situations, more baddies come in, more powerful, and to the point that the village couldn't be sustainable. So I think that kind of real world interaction by the characters in the world, I think it means something. And so players can't just like make light decisions and say, no, forget that. I think it makes that world more real, I think I would guess.
I don't know if I use the word real, but it gives it more flavor.
Definitely more flavor. So the GM obviously can help the players become engaged, but they cannot make the player be engaged, right? They can't you're going to sit down and pay attention to everything I tell you and just buckle down, buddy, and quit goofing around. No, that's not going to work. There's no way a player can be engaged if they don't want to or are reluctant to. So as a player, you definitely have a responsibility to be engaged yourself, right? Don't be easily distracted by things, or pay attention to what's going on.
I think that that there's a couple more things that GM could do before you switch over to players. Like,
go ahead.
They could utilize their NPCs to try to engage the players, right? Find and figure out which NPCs the players like and make them like recurring things.
I like that. I remember I used that, and it wasn't even something I did on purpose.
No.
It was the old game where you guys had somebody overseeing you, because you guys got land grants because you guys were big heroes, right? And you guys got homesteads or whatever, and you guys didn't want to do anything with it, right? So I'm like, okay, you got all this land, and you have some villages on it that you're just responsible for. That still didn't engage you.
That was when you were playing 3rd edition, right?
We were probably still playing 3rd or Pathfinder. One of the two.
Is it what the big boys were playing, as Augustine would say, when he was little, and with the
yes,
with the so it was. But we came upon it,
yes,
it was already a village
established.
Yeah.
Right, they had already, and so the older players, right, the big boys as you call them, you're right. That's where it was 3rd edition. They had all these land grants. They didn't want to play that micromanage, or not micromanage, but manage.
What was his name? The guy who was in charge?
Athlon.
Well, no, and the guy who was in charge of the
Jervis.
Yes, Jervis.
So they hired somebody, the company, the
players,
the heroes. Yeah. Felipe, I go, do you guys have a name? And Felipe goes, it's Athlon's company, right? Because he named it after himself.
Of course, then they all argued about it.
They all said, no, that's not what we're called. But every time I would ask them, hey, what are you guys called? Felipe wouldn't pipe up. So I gave them that name, whether they liked it or not, which is kind of funny anyway. That's like I said, that's like, what is it? Consequences for their actions, right? Because they all of them were indecisive. Right. Except for Felipe, who says, "Wow, I'm
name it after myself.
I'll name the company after myself." And so he always used it. So it's Athlon's company, and which caused all the other players to.
So then when we played, right, with the boys were what 9 through
10. 9 to about 14.
14, and we played To the King. I think it was what it was called.
That was the name of the campaign.
When we got to that village, we ran into Jarvis, and Steve was playing, who was in the original company.
Yeah, that's right.
And So the boys knew this place.
Yes.
They knew all of the names of the characters. And so it was fascinating for them to be there. And then Jarvis gave us tasks and
Right.
stuff. And it
Because
was,
you guys were low level.
Yeah.
The village or these land grant areas, whatever you want to call them, haciendas, they were very prosperous because Jarvis had this crazy idea of having these, what it would be, what do you call those people who, peasants?
farmers.
Well, they were peasants, really, and not even they don't own the land, right?
Right.
So what?
They work it, though.
They work it, right, for whatever,
And he makes them prosperous.
and he makes them prosperous. But Jervis goes, well, why don't I just give you these patches of land so that way you work better and you want to stay and you share in the profits. And I know it's kind of this crazy idea that I had of putting the real world economics into this area of land. And you're right. So when the kid players met the adult players as characters, or at least where they lived and stuff, they were like, oh yeah. And Steve, who was the dad of the kids, and he had played in both, he had played in the previous campaigns, he was like, oh yeah. And they all had, I forget the Don's name, the dwarf. Flint, that's right, and Flint and Athlon and all those other characters. They all had villages and stuff, and they all had towns named after them, which I thought, or villages named after them, and I thought it was interesting. And you're right, I think that was a bit of background that I created that made it interesting for the players to encounter.
Yeah, and there's always the barkeep or someone at a shop,
right,
who engages the players, or the sheriff, or different things. So NPCs can engage the players into the game, right?
Right.
And also, as the GM, you should know your audience. Like if you're going to have a what would you call it? Like a social intrigue kind of session.
Right.
And you have two players who could care less about that.
Right.
And they just want to go and fight stuff.
Right.
You need to consider the fact that you're going to need to, in that social intrigue, you're going to need to give them something to do so they're engaged.
You're right. If you have players that are not interested in a certain kind of situation, whether like social, like you said, social intrigue or court politics, right? Like courtly politics, they're going to be bored, right? So in that case, you present situations that they might find interesting, like, okay, dancing and finding out all these secrets. My character is uncouth, doesn't want to dance, and he doesn't want to schmooze with these elites. So he goes into the kitchen and I'm looking for a sandwich. Okay, and he as these people in the kitchen are making him a sandwich, something happens, right? Something is either stolen or some but it comes running through, comes running through the kitchen and asking for help that something's happened, and then those few characters will be engaged with that. It's kind of like splitting the party, but it's better than having two players who are completely bored at the table.
And if you do split the party, make sure you don't spend a whole half hour with one group and have the other group just sit there, because that's going to take the engagement out completely.
Yeah, switch back and forth.
Go back and forth. Do like 4 minutes of each of each thing or something like that.
Well, I would
in a more of a natural way. You don't have a timer out going, okay.
And in mid action, your time's up. You could. What I usually do is, in that sense, when I'm going from one scene to another, that's when I usually do the break and switch to the other party. And sometimes it's just natural, and sometimes if they're going a little long, you just have to. You're right. You got to put your foot down and goes, okay, and it's better
while you're discussing that,
or right before you roll initiative. John and Jill, how's that dance going? And then that's what you do, because you want to keep those players engaged in the table and waiting to come back, and not like, oh, we just finished the battle, now we can unplug and not pay attention to what's going on at the table. No, they're going to be actively listening, so when they're ready to come back to them, they're ready to get into it. So I think, so that's a great ideas.
Well, and I think that in that idea, you could also like have the person who, or the characters who are like trying to help the people in the kitchen, behind the scenes, the kitchen staff or the maids or whatever,
right?
That somehow they accidentally knock down a wall and are back in the ballroom, and then it's time for everybody to leave. That it comes full circle. Yeah, it comes back together. So those are just ideas to keep players engaged if they're not into whatever that current thing is that the scene you're doing or whatever you want to call it.
No, perfect. As a player, you have to be actively involved, and you have to just pay attention to what's going on the table. If you are slightly distracted, and this really happened with the cell phones when it became everybody had a cell phone. It was like, it's not my turn, and some people just instinctively whip out a phone and start texting or whatever it is. And it got to a point in the past, within the last quite a few years now, that cell phones have become, everybody has one, that GMs have said, okay, put your phones on mute, leave them in your pocket. I understand if there's some emergency, but most likely it isn't, right? And if it is an emergency, I have total no problem with you getting up and leaving the room and stuff like that. So those kind of like social rules have been talked about for at least 10 years. And people still do that, though. Still, people take out phones and they start.
I heard when we were looking at this, I was watching a YouTube video, and the guy was talking about how some people have ADHD, or some people so it depends on, like, if you're at a table with people, it's different than playing online.
Right.
But if you can, some of the things that you might think are rude or that they shouldn't be doing, sometimes those people are actually doing stuff to try to stay engaged with what's going on.
Right.
Like, for example, Kathy likes to either color things while we're playing,
yes,
or do some kind of craft. And it keeps her hands and her brain and her mouth busy while other people are playing. And then when it's her turn, she's ready to go.
Right. I totally understand that. And people, I've heard of people knitting or crocheting in between scenes, or in between when they're talking or whatever. And I think that kind of activity is less obtrusive, I guess. Even I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. I'm not even close. But it seems to me that's kind of like mundane work, like coloring.
Right.
It's just something to keep your hands busy.
Well, the guy was talking about how, because phones everybody has one.
Right.
People with ADHD will sometimes have like a background going. They get distracted from stuff.
Right.
So if they have that to just going right on their phone.
Right.
And it's just sitting there, and it's not like, it doesn't have sound or anything like that. Sometimes that is the same thing as somebody coloring a picture or doing or drawing.
I can understand
or
that.
Doodling or stuff. So you got to take into consideration those kind of things. And I know you don't like people on their phones because they're like scrolling and stuff. And doing different things. But I'm just saying that should be something that you can take into consideration, trying to engage all the players.
And it depends on the disruption, right? Because I had these two guys in playing, and this was at a con game, right? There was these two guys, they were friends. We never played, it was Cohorts Cthulhu, that adventure I ran for you guys. And they were sitting like two people away from each other, even though they were together, right? At one point, they whip out their phones and they're playing I figured out they're playing chess against each other, right? Playing chess. And because I first thought they were texting, but then I saw their screen. I'm like, whoa, that's weird. And I didn't say anything, right? They can do whatever they want. I mean, it didn't bother me. But when there was time for them to do something or they had something to say, they would just put down their phone and they were like listening to what was going on. So I didn't have to repeat myself as to, okay, and then go, hold on, what's going on?
I think that's what he was talking about, because I know for me, I usually just doodle while people are talking and nonsensical lines all over. Yeah, because I found out, I figured that out a long time ago just at work, that if I'm in a meeting, if I keep my hand busy doing something, I can keep my brain focused on what the people are talking about.
No matter how boring
instead of trying to actually listen to them.
Right.
That way I'm hearing what's going on. And I think that's exactly what he was talking about.
Right. Well, as a GM, you have to understand your players.
Right.
And sometimes if you're playing with strangers, maybe as a player, you might want to give that information to the player.
Give everybody a clue at the table. Like when Kathy pulls out a thing to draw, because I always give her, because she gets fidgety when she's like trying to pay attention to stuff, if she needs something to do.
Yeah.
And so I always have stuff and I hand it to her, crayons and something.
And then she goes right into it.
And she can do like their intricate little things there.
Right.
And that helps her to stay calm and engaged. But that took me a while to figure out what the problem was, because she never said anything about it. I just observed it and figured it out. So as a GM or a player, you might be able to.
But she's also, we've also known her for a long time.
Yeah.
she's a good friend. So it's not like she's a total stranger and like, oh, you figured it out.
Yeah, I wouldn't
within one
I
day.
would not hand people crayons and coloring pages if I didn't know them.
Right.
Because they'd be going, what is she doing?
Also, as the GM gives you choices, as a player, make those choices, right? You have to make choices for the game to continue. You can't just stall out on deciding left or right, that kind of decision. And especially if the GM is peppering those choices with interesting information, right? So it's just not an arbitrary left or right. It's like, well, you smell something on this dungeon going to the right. It smells like rotten egg, and you hear the trickling of water, or I don't know, trickling of water, right? And on the other side, it's really dark. It feels really dry. You can hear wind howling in the distance. So I mean, I don't know what that means as if I didn't have something in planned, but for the players, they might find, and they might discuss things, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to go into where it's water and damp.
That gets them engaged.
Right.
Those are interesting little facts that the GM throws out, and players should take advantage of that. Sometimes the GM will say that, and players are thinking in their heads, which way should we go? And so it's like silent for a minute until somebody starts asking questions.
Right.
And then everybody gets engaged.
And then there's always the metagame that goes, which way do you think he wants us to go?
Yeah.
I'm like, I could care less as a GM, I'm saying, because it doesn't really matter. Or it doesn't really matter to them which way you go. And that kind of happened in the Lost Mines in Phandelver. You guys had just stuck to one side of the mine, right?
Well, we didn't know that.
Of course not. I'm not going to tell you. There was a lot of interesting things happening on the other side that would have happened. It would have made the game twice as long. But I decided, well, no, you know what? You guys got the main bad guy and you went straight to the village. You didn't even decide to explore the other side. And it wasn't until you went to the village, you did all these things, and then the village goes, well, let's check out what you found. And then I told you, well, there was all these other things there and you guys figure out the rest, but I'm not going to roleplay that because there's no point because the whole village is there.
I think that sometimes when you're mission specific, like me, you give me a mission, we completed the mission.
Yeah, you find the guy.
We found the dwarf that was missing. We killed the bad guy, and then
exited
I'm like, oh, okay. Are we? I didn't think anything about. I didn't think there was a whole other part of the dungeon. I'm like,
it was pretty funny because then I revealed the whole dungeon.
And Tom's all, I got into a group that's not really good at dungeons, I guess. And I'm like going, okay.
That was the new player, by the way.
I'm all,
the old new player.
I'm all, okay.
So choices. If there's a choice to make, the GM's not just throwing things out there arbitrarily. They want you to follow a certain path or things like that. No, they just want you to make a decision.
And it wasn't wrong that we finished our mission because we could have said, okay, now we'll go back in there and do this, right?
Right.
It's just that there was a mission specific thing that we were
that's
supposed to be doing,
yeah,
right?
That's what
we
were
thought.
there for. And the rest could be taken. And it was for me, it was, what is it?
It wasn't.
Time wasn't of the essence, right?
Right.
And for you to rescue the dwarf, it was. Because you didn't know if he was alive or dead, but you definitely knew he was a captive.
Yes.
And the bad guy would have definitely killed one guy, so he's going to kill the next guy. There was hope for you to
try to get him alive.
Now, with that gone,
the pressing situation.
Exactly. Then you could just at leisure go into the mine with hundreds of people or whatever and just ferret out all the baddies and figure things out. And hence why I didn't feel like having you run.
Because
there was no reason to, because you had the village and the village was curious that you found.
Well, not only that, we had the guy who was not feeling very well, although we did heal him.
Yes.
Right. And we needed to get him back to his brother because his brother was anxious about it. But it wasn't like we could have taken him through the whole dungeon and tried not to get him killed. But
would it have been bad if this there goes the guy you try to rescue. He's dead. Make a decent backstory. And not necessarily a long, complicated 3-4 pages of life and times of your character. Just some things that they're interested in, or maybe where they come from and why they're doing what they're doing. Just some basic questions asking yourself, and then just answer them. And all this is to help the GM give you some interesting plot hooks that you as a player and your character would be interested in.
And as far as being an engaged player, you should also look around the table and make sure that, because they're always talking about their spotlight of, does everybody get a spotlight? And
right.
So are you talking too much? Which sometimes I worry I talk too much. But then ask other players, to help you with stuff, or like different people can do different things. Like in the game we just finished on Friday, I was a fighter, but I'm with all of these magic users.
Right.
So Mike, his name is Kappa. I can't say
Capability.
He told me, this is what I want you to do. So run in and save the papers. So I did that, but I'm a fighter, right? I have a torch in one hand. I've got all these papers and an armful of books and papers that I'm trying to save. And then I'm stuck in a situation in between all these magic users. And I'm like, oh, well, I can't drop the papers. I'm thinking, right?
Yeah.
So, but I'm like, okay, well, I have a torch. I'll just keep trying to
bash them
with the torch and let the magic users do their stuff.
Right.
So for me, I'm like, and Saul's all, why didn't you just take out your sword and fight? And I'm like,
I totally forgot she had the papers in one arm.
I have all these papers. I can't just drop them. And then I go, and I didn't think about just walking out into the hallway and setting them down and coming back. And I didn't really need to, because I didn't need to be cast. I mean, they were casting. Everybody cast spells.
Those spells
it wasn't a problem for me. I was just hoping I wouldn't get singed or.
And then you were basically protecting them because you were in front of them.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah.
Except toward the end when they finally got brave and started moving forward. It's pretty funny. So I think the key for a better engagement is communication, right? Communication is key to a lot of problems in role playing games, and probably solves a lot of problems in freaking life. But at the table, just talk to your players, talk to your GM, and tell them what you want, or how you feel the game should go, or how it's going, or give them words of praise, whatever it is. And this kind of takes me back to when I was in junior college, Hartnell Junior College in Salinas. And it was Mr. Davies, I believe his name was. It was a business law class. And I remember the things that from that class still to today. And one of the things I really took to heart and still remember is the idea of contracts, right? For a contract to be valid between two people, there has to be a meeting of the minds. Both people have to understand what this contract means. And that has to deal with communication. And so a meeting of the minds between players and GMs will do wonders for your game at the table, for your enjoyment of the campaign, and make a better experience, and make those memories that make everybody like, oh, remember when? And we still do that. I mean, we'll do that about what happened the last week about, how you didn't have a weapon, so you're bashing this giant spider with a torch, doing
no damage,
doing 1 to 4 points of damage because, your improvised weapon. And I totally forgot that you had that armful of papers, even though you told me.
Yeah, talking about being an engaged player, I was engaged in the hilarity that was ensuing around me, because I didn't need to be the person killing these things.
Right.
I could just be there trying to survive.
Yeah, and you were a bit of a buffer too, though, because they couldn't advance on, and there was spells flying left and right.
And that was the other thing. And I'm with a bunch of dragonborns too.
That's right.
So I was like, "Oh, you're gonna throw your breath weapon? Is it gonna hit me?"
Yes. And at one point, I was going, "Oh yeah, you're definitely gonna hit her." And then the guy goes, "Not if I turn my head this way." And I go, "You freaking."
Which
guys.
was good. That's engagement, right?
Yes.
All the players were engaged
they were all paying attention.
Yeah.
And I thought it was
and
funny.
that's what you want.
Yeah.
Right?
And then the little guy, he whispered step behind him and stuff. And then he goes, "Oh my God, I'm by myself."
As big spiders coming out.
Yeah. Great game.
Anything else about engaging?
Nope.
So there you go. Hopefully this gave you some ideas on how to be an engaged player and engage your players as the GM. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And you have a good day.
Look right, look left. If the course is clear,